And this next question is from D. Jonathan. Hey, Michael, I'm a big fan of your videos. Keep up the good work. Not a question, but I'm seeking some career advice. I've accepted a network engineer position a few months ago, but I since realized that the role was not what I thought it would be. For the past month, I've been feeling stagnant as the work I'm doing is not really network engineering. What advice would you give for someone in my situation? Do I stick it out for at least a year or should I start putting myself back into the market? Ouch. Let's talk about that. Okay, so it is extremely important to understand the job roles and responsibility for any job that you're applying for. That is extremely important. So when you're going in for the interview, you want to ask specific questions. You want to ask questions like, what are my roles or responsibility for the position that you're hiring for? What kind of access to the equipment will I actually have? Will I have access to the routers, the switches, the firewalls in the environment where I can make configuration changes for troubleshooting type of administration work? Ask those specific questions. Basically, set it up like it's a scenario. Will I actually be doing projects where I actually will be configuring routers and connecting them into the environment? That will give really good information because they would say, well, you might do this, you might do that. No, you need to be very clear on what your roles could be. Because I've seen a lot of people apply for roles that they think is a network engineering position. No, it's a knock position. So they get phone calls from customers, and yes, they might log on to the routers and do a few things. But no, it's the other ISP engineers that's doing all the networking stuff. And you're like, well, I want to be there. Now, maybe you don't have the experience to be there, but it should be branded as a knock engineer. That's fine. If it gives you a little bit of exposure for networking, that's fine. Remember, it's a stepping stone. You have to get there with some level of experience. But again, you want to figure this out during the interview process to explain what will you be doing on a day-to-day basis and what kind of projects will you be physically doing. Now, this is something that I have said a whole lot about job titles, but job titles are very misleading. Okay, so if you're looking for a job, you see a list of all open opportunities, and one of them says network engineer. I will apply for that because that's exactly what I want to do. Don't jump the gun so fast. Okay, that's great. It says network engineer, but read the description. Try to figure out what is the actual roles and responsibilities for that position. What kind of access will I have to actual networking equipment on a configuration and a support basis? Both. Okay. Am I going to be configuring a brand new router from scratch and plugging it in? You want to ask that exact question as clearly as you can so then you can get a very clear answer and response from the employer. Okay. So job titles for me really mean nothing at all because job titles are established by human resources. Now, human resources will go to the IT staff and say, hey, we're trying to figure out, what kind of job title should we use for advertising this open position that we have. What do you recommend? Now, some places will say, oh yeah, so just put down, and this is a senior position. So senior network engineer or network engineer, okay? And then they will provide, this is what the description is. They'll provide that details. Or you might deal with a person who is very colorful. So they may say things like, we want to spice things up. We'll say a cloud security engineer. That always bugs me. Because whenever employers, whenever people are looking for network engineers and they consult with me because I'm part of that interview process, they tell me, what should we use for the actual job title when we talk about these open positions? I tell them, network engineer, okay? And be very clear in your description for what that means. Don't be vague. If they're doing phone support, then say phone support, because that's what these people are looking for. And if they were misled, they're going to likely get angry, okay? Because they were basically, they were fooled, okay? They were lied to. And that means that they won't be loyal to you, which means that they will likely be out the door. There's a company that I know. I won't say the company by name, but their staff, their job title is network engineer. And I saw it's a lot of their business cards. And here's the thing about that. They do zero networking. They do all server work, desktop builds. But their job title is network engineer. They don't touch routers or firewalls. They don't know what a routing table is. I'm not exaggerating. I'm actually being sincere about this. Okay. Now, eventually they realized this, and I think they changed their titles around. I was brought into their environment to take care of some of their networking projects. But that's the point that I'm trying to convey here. That their title was network engineer. So you could probably say, that's what I want to do. I'm a network engineer for an MSP. Score. No, they did no networking at all. Okay, so let's say that you are in that position. Okay, so you understand that asking the right questions is important. Job titles are misleading. Well, what do you actually do? How can you learn from that? So really, there's a couple of things I would recommend if you are in that position. So number one, again, treat this as a learning experience. Figure out what went wrong. Figure out, was it the description? Was it how things went during the interview process? Figure out what went wrong, because that can help you to know what not to do next time when you are applying for other potential opportunities that will come up. The second thing, which is what I talked about, is understand very clearly what is your primary roles and responsibilities. What access will you have? What kind of projects will you be doing? Be very specific to understand what your job will be. Another thing is to understand and determine the environment you're working in, which you can also gather during the interview process. But if you're currently there, figure out, is there a networking department? Because maybe there isn't a networking department, which means that there isn't a need for a network engineer. Networking is more interesting for the medium and large size companies. That's where you got a lot of the network technologies and protocols. That's the cool stuff. Networking at a small or SMB size, not so much. It's very, very limited. It's more servers and maybe more desktops than anything else. So maybe you applied for a position that there is no immediate requirement for a network person. So you want to kind of figure that out to kind of help you to know when you're applying for jobs. Am I applying for a small size company, an SMB, a medium, or a large? Because that's going to really dictate the kind of networking roles that you may have. The bottom line is this. You got to do what you want to do. And if you're not doing that, then you should leave. But you should be, of course, very careful about what you apply for and what you get into for next time. But you can also treat this as, well, what kind of work are you actually doing? That's really a question I really want to extend and get more information about. Are you doing no networking at all? No routers, no switches, or maybe you're expecting to do much more routers and switches. So that's really important, because let's say that you are doing just a little bit of networking. Yeah, it's not as much as you want to, okay? But you're doing just a little bit of it, especially if you're starting out. That little bit counts. It counts because you can reflect that onto your resume, and that can then present future opportunities where you can become a network engineer because you have that practical experience. Maybe you are there for a year, okay? So you do a little bit of this networking stuff, building up your experience, but you're also maybe building up your certifications. You're getting certified, you're doing more labs, you're taking basically advantage of the time that you're there. So maybe you're there for a year doing all these things, then you can put yourself back into the market and find other opportunities. But again, being very careful of understanding what is your roles, responsibility, projects, and what kind of access physical access you will have in that environment. Okay, let's do one more question. I'm on a roll here. Let's do one more, and this is a good one. This one is from Waleed, and it's a long one. So really, in summary, he does a lot of studying, a lot of practice labs, things like that. So his question is related to that. His question is my knowledge after all of these certifications and time of studying and doing virtual labs doesn't reach any level of experience? What I mean is, can I do VLANs, configure OSPF, etc., etc.? Can I say in an interview that I have knowledge and a basic or good experience in all of these things? Is there a big difference between books, virtual labs, and real equipment? If I have a knowledge and experience in virtual labs that can let me configure real equipment. So this is really a question about, from all the studying that I'm actually doing, the labs that I am building, I'm configuring OSPF, VLANs, routing, VPNs, MPLS, traffic engineering. Can that really suffice as good, at least basic experience that can land me a job at least as a junior network engineer? Great question. I got a lot of points about that, so let's get started. Okay, so real experience with real networks, it is very, very important. Remember, certifications, it is taught more from a conceptual perspective and less practical. Here's a great example of that. During my CCIE lab exam, okay, there was a particular question that says, you have all these routers and they're connected together and you configure OSPF, okay? But for this link between these two routers, you need to change the OSPF cost to be 15. I'm making it up, by the way. It needs to be a cost of 15. But you cannot use the command IP OSPF cost then that value, which is 15. I saw that question on my CCIE lab exam and I laughed, because that is not practical. Now I'm giving you a very simple example of that because it is the best example to illustrate my point about real experience and book certification experience. Okay, I'm a network engineer. If I want to use the command IP OSPF cost 15, I'm going to do that. Now I get it. They're trying to make sure that I know the formula to calculate the cost based on the bandwidth. I got that, but it doesn't matter. The point is I will use that command, and I have used that command in 10,000 user based environments. You can't tell me things that I can't do and things that I can do. That's not how that works. In practical environments, we use the tools that are available to us. Okay. Furthermore, you're on a time limit. You got to configure this network within a day. No, that's not how that works. I mean, I can spend maybe several days to set up a network, and there's planning, there's prep configuration. The whole CCIE, the top level certification, was basically formed in a way that it was not practical at all. I have known a lot of network engineers, which are way smarter than me, way more experienced than me, right? They failed the CCIE exam and they just never got it. They failed it. So it wasn't me saying, haha, I'm better than you because I got my CCIE. No, it doesn't mean that, because they have a lot of practical experience. I work with them. They're great guys. Okay. So there's a big difference there between certifications and real experience, because the things that we do in the real world is never reflected in a CCIE lab, which is dedicated for inter-networking experts. So the main question really is about lab experience, home experience basically, versus real world experience. Okay? Because you're right. You're like configuring OSPF, some static routes, VPN tunnels in a lab environment. I'm going to be doing the same thing in a real environment. So what's the big deal? Here's really what this is really all about. Okay? So for one, Doing the labs is important because it's giving you exposure to the various commands, how to configure various protocols and technologies, and how to run debugs, how to troubleshoot, how to use some of these show commands to validate what you are configuring is correct and working. But with real world experience, it will present you various or many scenarios that's going to test you of what commands do you use to handle that scenario. Configuration commands, show commands. How would you test this to validate that there is a problem? How do you even troubleshoot that to begin with? These are things that are unseen, unscripted, that no certification can technically teach you. The only thing that can teach you that is experience. The more experience that you have, the more exposure that you have to things, you kind of see similarities in some of the scenarios, like a pattern. So you can know how you troubleshoot, how you do configuration, how you test and verify certain things. That only happens with experience of being exposed to more scenarios. Remember what I said in the previous episode or one of the other episodes that I talked about, that the more experience you have, the less mistakes that you actually make. And that's because when you have 5-10 years of experience, you are exposed to hundreds, maybe even thousands of scenarios, whether it's new configurations, whether it is support troubleshooting. I've seen a lot of crazy troubleshooting stuff that I had to deal with, stuff that I had never seen before. But I kind of just do what I have pretty much done before for how I troubleshoot things. And that helps me. It's hard for me to actually tell you how I troubleshoot things because I've been involved in many different scenarios. And that experience has kind of helped me to know how to deal with one problem after the other. So I don't want to get you guys worried about that. Like, how do I get myself prepared for these different scenarios? You don't. Only experience is what you will gain that will help you to deal with the different scenarios that you will encounter. Because the more experience you have, you will build your own techniques and strategies for how you do new deployments or how you troubleshoot issues that will come up. So Waleed, it is good that you're doing certifications, you're doing your labs. Continue to do that. Perfect doing basic configuration, confirming, testing, troubleshooting using show commands. But you still want to make sure that you are able to be in an environment, okay, that can allow you to give you exposure to getting hands-on experience. So again, watch the videos, all the videos on this channel, as I provide a lot of good information about what you can do, the kind of environments to apply for, and that will get you really where you need to be to gain that experience that you should advance pretty quickly because you've been doing a lot of the labs. Everything helps, and that will help you hopefully get you to where you need to be and to gain the experience to keep moving ahead. And we are done with this episode. So if you have any questions about being a network engineer or anything in the networking field, post those questions below in the comments and your question will come up in a future episode. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe and support us at routehub.net. Until next time, keep networking.